Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for attending your midweek motivation. This week we are talking about motivation to move past failure. So oftentimes we get stuck in taking action because we've failed at it, and we might have some blocks, whether that's fear to fail again, or if it's frustration from failing, and or if it's a lack of clarity of knowing what to do because what we did before we failed at. So I want to address how failure can truly impact our motivation, but we can turn that around and we can really get motivation to move past that failure. We can leverage motivation to push through that failure if we just know it exists and address it. Sometimes it's one of those things is that once you learn about it and you kind of your eyes are open to it, it's harder to not see that any longer. So what is one thing think about your goal? What is the thing you are wanting more motivation to do? When someone asks you, what's your biggest challenge to completing or doing, whatever it may be, whether it's family, home, work, health, or fitness related, when you hear something like, what's your biggest challenge to doing this? And you respond with motivation. Motivation is my biggest challenge. I don't feel like doing it ever. And remember, motivation is a feeling that we can cultivate. It's an emotion that we can cultivate. And just like the Zig Ziglar quote says, motivation doesn't last, but neither does bathing. That's why we recommend doing it every day. Okay, so we recommend, and Zig Ziglar recommends getting motivated, motivating yourself every day to help you to really be successful and live the life that you want to live. So oftentimes what gets so difficult for us is that we aren't motivated to do anything or whatever the goal is. And so we don't feel like we are living in alignment with what we truly value. You might actually value whatever it is you're wanting to be motivated to do, but you're not actually doing it and you don't feel like doing it. And so therefore you feel out of alignment of living an authentic lifestyle. So it's really important to learn how to cultivate motivation for yourself. And we've talked about that in many other meetings for our midweek motivation. But today I'm going to talk about addressing failure, because failure can really be a big killer of our motivation if it holds us back. So again, I asked you to think about what your goal is, what you are wanting to be motivated to do, whether it's home, work, fitness, or health related. What is it? If you like, you can put that in the chat box. And this may change from week to week, even day to day. One day you might feel very motivated and other days you may not, and you need to cultivate that motivation. So what is it for today? All right, so as you get that in mind, I want you to think about, have you ever experienced failure with this? Have you experienced something that has been so disappointing and you're just really unsure if you'll be able to carry on? And if that's the case, you're in the right place today. Okay, so the main message for today is that we want to break through failure by making sure we are learning from it. And to learn from it, we have to fail, try again. Learn from that failure and then try it again. Learn from that failure and then try it again. And that leads us to the next slide, where I have a couple of quotes. The first one I want to talk about is, I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that won't work. So that's something that I love. I love to learn. Okay, I've tried this. I can scratch that off the list. Tried it and it didn't work. It didn't work for me, so I'm going to move on to the next thing, instead of saying I failed and I'm never going to try again. So this quote, I think, by Thomas Edison is very powerful. It just helps us to realize we're getting closer. We're getting closer to learning what will work by crossing out what doesn't work for us. The other quote here is, it's fine to celebrate success, but it is more important to heed the lessons of failure. And so here it's just facing the failure is required in order to heed those lessons. Even though we really want to only be successful, if we fail, it is so important to heed the lessons. And to do those, we have to face the failure, even though it might be a little bit painful. And so I have a few tips for you. How can we face the failure? Hopefully these tips will motivate you to do just that, face the failure or the fear of failure, with these 3 tips to start us out. 1, give yourself permission to feel and acknowledge, to recognize and acknowledge the failure, that feeling of failure, or even that fear of failure. Give yourself permission to feel it. And this might be the step where you need help. So that leads into the next one. Either you need to have self-compassion when you're dealing with that failure, or you need to have connection, or both, ideally. Ideally, you'll have self-compassion and connection with others. And so, but if you need to, this is where therapy or listening to some qualified teachers and professionals to share information on how to do this and to even connect with them, or to even discuss these feelings with friends, family, fitness professionals, especially if it's fitness related. But if you can, 1, give yourself permission to feel, and as you work through that process, give yourself compassion and connect with others. Those will be 2 really strong ways to face failure. So one example I have of this, this has nothing to do with fitness, but in April, I was in a car accident and it was my fault. And I felt it was a minor accident. Nobody was injured and barely any damage, but enough damage to where I felt terrible. And it was impactful to, schedules getting ruined, and it was a little scary. So, but that was clearly a failure that I had on my part. And so I had to, that whole night, of course, was awake through the night, ruminating over this accident and what I had done, what I hadn't done, what other people would think, and all those things. But finally, I gave myself permission to face the failure and be like, okay, I failed. And the next step was giving myself self-compassion. And I have to admit, I struggled to do that right away. It was when I started talking with others, as they saw the dent in my car, they shared their own personal accidents, their stories. And I see in the news, like, other accidents that had happened that were much worse. And that connection with these other stories, with friends and family, really helped me to have more self-compassion with myself. And so I think you'll be able to, that's just an example. As you do that, I've had the same thing happen. We're building a house right now, and it's been a difficult situation, many failures there too. And discussing it with others who have gone through the process is helpful. Same with fitness. If you have failed at losing weight, discuss it with others. Guaranteed you are not alone. Everybody has failed at losing weight or sleeping or whatnot. So discuss and give yourself self-compassion. You are normal. And then 3, this is the crucial step too, is to revisit your goals. Then instead of saying, I'm never going to drive again, I failed, got in an accident, I'm never going to drive again, I revisit my goals of what is my goal here? What's the purpose of driving from point A to point B? It gives us freedom. It gives us opportunity, so many things. And so really be thinking about what was the reason you had that goal in the first place that you failed at, and revisit, why did you have that? Now, sometimes you'll realize that goal isn't worth it. It's taking us to a dangerous place. So maybe I realized, oh, I was driving in an area that I shouldn't have been, or in a manner I shouldn't have been. Revisit the goals, and then it leads us into our next slide here, where it's to embrace the failure, reflect on what you learned. So if you're here revisiting your goals and where you were at when this happened, and you learn from that. Where was the gap? What happened or what didn't happen? And reflect on those learnings of what you have gathered from this experience. So reflect on the learnings, embrace the growth mindset, meaning you can change. You can make different decisions in the future, or you can learn what didn't work and make adjustments. And then you can create the next plan. That's the third step, is create your next plan. Don't get stuck in the failure right here in this try, fail. If you get stuck there and you don't try again, you never get over to the success area. And when I say success, I mean alignment with your authentic self, with your true internal self of who you want to be and the life you want to live. That to me is success. So if you try and then fail, don't get stuck there. Go back and try again. And you might fail again, and that's okay. Especially per Thomas Edison, you'll have found another way that didn't work. And you will have reflected on these learnings. You've connected with other people, and you will hopefully then create a new plan that will help move you a little bit further towards success. And the quote I'll leave us on here today is embrace failure. Missteps and roadblocks are inevitable, but are ultimately an opportunity to learn, pivot, and go after your goals with a new perspective. So missteps and roadblocks are inevitable. They're going to happen. Can you guys share any roadblocks or missteps you have had in the chat box? Now, this is an opportunity for us to connect with others. I'm going to stop the recording, and we will wrap up with the last few minutes of our time, just kind of sharing in private with just a few people on the line today, what some of those missteps are.